Hello my lovelies and welcome to the Spirit Tarot and Healing Arts YouTube channel. If you are new, welcome back. If you are a returning viewer, I'm Rin and today we are taking a look at the Spiderweb spread combined with the Gypsy Witch fortune telling cards deck. Now, full disclosure, clarity, this is not a spread that is traditional to this deck. I actually learned it probably well over a decade ago when I was studying a method for reading playing cards. Now, if you look up this spread, it very often has a slightly different name to it, and that name implies a certain origin. Now, while I do not know, nor have I found any credible sources that can show the origin of this particular spread, we do know that it is not associated with the culture that is implied by the title you often see this spread listed under. So I call this the Spiderweb spread. Now, on my shop, I do this with a tarot deck, but I really felt like it was a spread that combined well with the Gypsy Witch fortune telling card deck. I don't offer this with this deck on my shop, but that doesn't mean it's not a good deck spread combo. It does work really well. I like a bit of a different flavor when I'm doing this read professionally. I prefer when I'm doing a professional reading to use the tarot for this spread, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a very good spread for this deck. And if I'm just doing readings for friends or myself, I will do the Spiderweb spread with this deck for myself or my friends. Before we dive into how to lay out this spread and how to read this spread, what the positions mean, I want to just give a quick note on timing. When I do this professionally in my shop, there are the last two rows are about predictions or the future. So the sixth row is the near future, and the seventh column, actually, not rows, the seventh column is about the long-term future. Now, when I do this reading professionally, if you follow me, you guys know that in professional readings, I really don't like to go out past 90 days because our fates are not fixed. Nothing is written in stone. The choices we make and the choices that other people involved in the situation make can alter the outcome that we see in the cards. And I personally feel, and from my own experience, that if we only look at what's possible within the next 90 days, we tend to be a little more accurate because we're kind of more on that course. So unless we really work to change the outcome, that's pretty close to how we're going to see things turn out. So when I do a professional reading, that sixth column is what is likely in the next 4 weeks from when the reading is done, and then that seventh column will be what's likely from week 5 to week 12, because we're looking at a 12-week period. Now, you don't have to do it that way. If you do timing differently, or you are more comfortable with predicting farther out, then you could have column 6 be the next 3 months, and then column 7 could be however long into the future. I do recommend that you put some sort of time frame on it and don't just leave it open as forever, but that is my suggestion, my recommendation. You do you. But that is how I work the timing of the last 2 columns. Alright, so let's talk about laying out this spread. You can, if you want, do the yes-no question. That is traditional with this deck. If you aren't familiar, you can go check out my other video on spreads for this deck where I talk about, in the little white book, it suggests putting one of the jokers into the deck, shuffling the deck, and then turning over cards from the top of the deck until you get to the joker, counting the cards as you go. If the joker is an even numbered card, then it means yes. If the joker is an odd number card, then it means no. But that's the real quick version. You can do that before you lay out the Spiderweb spread if you want, but you do not have to. Now, when I do this spread with this deck, I remove the lady and the gentleman from the deck. You don't have to do that. You can leave them in, but I take them out. I find that they aren't very helpful if they fall within these 21 cards, so I pluck them out. So, pluck out the lady and the gentleman if you want. You can do the yes/no question using the Joker if you want. If you do that, make sure that you remove the Joker from the deck before you lay out the Spiderweb spread. Now, I personally find that this spread works better if you are asking a specific question, especially an open-ended question, but I have done and I have also seen this spread done as a general reading. But again, I really prefer that there is a question asked. I think you get a more meaningful reading that way, but it's up to you. Maybe you just really need some guidance, but you're not even sure where to begin with formulating a question. I get that. That happens to all of us. So you can do this reading in those situations if you want, but I do recommend that if you have a question, ask a specific question. So ask the question, shuffle your cards however you normally shuffle your cards, and then you're going to start in the upper left-hand corner. You're going to lay out 7 cards from left to right. Then you'll come down to the second row and you'll lay out 7 more cards left to right. And then you'll come down to the third row and you'll lay out 7 more cards left to right. Now, we laid the cards out in rows, but we are going to read in columns, which will give us 7 positions for this spread. Column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And each column has 3 cards that you will interpret in relation to each other and in conjunction with each other. And those columns, again, go left to right. So the column all the way on the left is column 1. And in this particular spread that I laid out, we've got the scythe, the tower, and the birds in column 1. Column 1 is called the self. It represents the querent. So if you're reading for yourself, it is literally the self, but if you're reading for someone else, the self column is about the querent. It shows what is most important to the querent, or if it doesn't tie in directly to the question, it's showing sort of an underlining influence that's very tied into the question, or it can also show what the question really is. And if you read like Lenormand and that, there's some other different spreads that do a card like that where it's like, this is what the querent's asking, but this is what they really want to know. And sometimes that's very much in line with what they asked, and sometimes it's not. And there's all different reasons why sometimes we don't necessarily pose the question we really want the answer to. Sometimes it's because we don't know how to form that question, and sometimes it's because maybe we don't want to face that question and its potential answers. Next up, we have in column 2 the querent's personal environment. So this can mean close relationships with friends, families, lovers. It can also mean relationships with coworkers, and it can also show the client or the querent's home environment or work environment. Column 3 is hopes and dreams. It shows the querent's hopes, their dreams about whatever the question is that they asked, but sometimes it can show the querent's fears, as it does in this particular spread that I have laid out. We have the broken mirror, the cats, and the coffin. In this particular case, the querent is afraid that someone is blowing smoke up their behind, and that they're not going to be lucky in this particular endeavor, and that it's just going to be an end to the goal they have in mind. So in this particular case, it does not show the hopes and dreams of the querent. It very much shows the fears of the querent. So it can go either way. It's called the hopes and dreams column, but it can reveal the querent's fears as well. So column 4 is called known factors, and I know that it can seem sort of weird, like why are we asking the cards to reveal what is already known, but it can help to give some context to things, and it also can sort of give confirmation or verification about what's coming through in the reading as a whole. But this particular column, it talks about things that the client already knows or is already aware of. So it could be plans that the client has already made or the querent. It could be things that have already happened. It could be setbacks that the querent has already experienced in regard to the topic of the reading. It could be consequences that they're already living with or having to navigate because of things that have happened in regard to the question. And it can also function a little like column 1. Sometimes column 1 will give us the real question or what is really important to the querent. This column 4, known factors, can also pinpoint what the client is really concerned about if they haven't actually voiced that. So the real question sometimes comes through in column 1, and here in column 4, sometimes the thing that they are really concerned about can come through in this column. So while column 4 looks at the known factors, column 5 is called your hidden destiny. And this column can reveal surprises that might be just around the corner. It can reveal developments that the client isn't aware of, things that are going on behind the scenes that are working for or against the querent, but they are not yet aware of it. They might have an inkling, but they aren't 100% certain. Now, I do not look at fate as something that is fixed. I know that there are some people who do. They believe that everything has already been written out and there's really not a whole lot of changing or deviating from that. I do not find that to be the case, but just because this spread has been around for a while and I want to accurately represent the spread, under this particular column, column 5, they traditionally have also been, these cards have been interpreted as someone's fate or cosmic justice when it comes to the topic at hand, the question that has been asked. Now, again, our fates are not fixed in stone, at least in my experience, through all of the years that I have been doing readings and just living and being a medium. But I just want to throw that in there because you will often see those particular terms attached to this column. So now we're on column 6, which I've kind of already talked about a little bit, but this is the short-term future, events that are likely to occur pretty soon within the time that the reading is done. Now, soon is a relative term, so again, I do advise that you set a time frame for column 6 and column 7, but what time frame you set is up to you. How you define soon is up to you. Again, I like to do this column as what is likely within the next 4 weeks. And our last column, column 7, is the long-term outcome. Some people call it the ultimate outcome. Now, I don't like to call it that because, again, I like to put a stop date on these readings. So for me, column 7 looks at week 5 through week 12 after the reading is done, but you can define your own time frames. But again, because our fates are not fixed, the future isn't written in stone, I don't like to do the ultimate outcome. I like to do what is most likely within that particular time frame that I have outlined. In most cases, I would say 75% of the time. I haven't actually done the math, but I'm just throwing out a number that feels right. These cards in column 7 will be pretty close in alignment with the cards of column 6. You'll be able to weave a coherent story between column 6 and column 7. They usually go pretty hand in hand. You might see a little bit of change or deviation in column 7 from what you saw in column 6, but usually they're on a very similar trajectory. And that's actually what we see in the column 6 and 7 here. Both talk about moving past or through obstacles, getting news that will help to work around any obstacles or blockages that this querent has had in regard to their question. So they're very similar. One confirms the other. The trajectory is pretty clear, pretty coherent, pretty cohesive. Sometimes, though, column 7 will be very different than column 6. And when that happens, then it could indicate that there are some unexpected twists or turns that are likely to occur. There's not an opportunity for those twists and turns to show up in this particular reading. So if you find that to be the case, that column 7 is very different than column 6, even if it is that column 6 is sort of like what the querent wants won't happen, but then column 7 is like, oh, ultimately it will, given some more time. No matter which way it goes, if column 7 shows a favorable outcome and column 6 showed maybe a less than favorable outcome, or column 7 shows an undesirable outcome, but column 6 was looking like the querent was headed in the right direction. Any way you slice it, the querent, at least if you're me, is going to want information on what the twists and turns are and why there's a big difference between column 6 and column 7. So in those particular cases, I will always draw some people would call them clarifying cards, or you could honestly just start asking other questions to help you navigate why there's such a big difference between column 6 and column 7. Now, if you want to keep with just one deck, you can draw the cards from the Gypsy Witch fortune telling card, but you could also draw cards from an oracle deck. You could draw tarot cards, you could draw Lenormand cards, you could draw Kipper cards. You could use dice to get some clarity on why there's a big difference between column 6 and column 7. Pendulum, whatever you like. You can stick with the Gypsy Witch cards, or you can use a different form of divination to sort of flesh out why there's a difference from column 6 to column 7. The Kipper Path of 7 reading can sometimes be a good reading to do in a case like this, of like, how do we get from point A to point B? But it's up to you and or your querent if you want to investigate why, we see a difference between column 6 and column 7 sometimes. To be perfectly honest, in this particular case, with this particular deck in this spread, I don't like to draw more cards from this deck. So if I'm doing this reading with this deck and there's a big discrepancy between column 6 and column 7, and I want to know what the twists and turns are that are going to get me from point A to point B, or the querent from point A to point B, then I will grab my pendulum, I'll grab a tarot deck, or I will grab something different to read on why there's a difference from 6 to 7, how we get from point A to point B. But you can do that however it works for you. But that's it. It's a relatively simple spread, but it does give a lot of information. Like I said, professionally, I do this with a tarot deck, but this spread does work very well with the Gypsy Witch fortune telling cards, and I know people are always looking for spreads to use with this deck, so I thought I'd do a quick video to show you this one, and I hope that it helps you enjoy this deck and get really great readings from it, because I do feel like it's an understated or an underrated deck in the cartomancy community. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps me out. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. That way you'll know when I post new content. Don't forget to check out my merch shop and my journal shop. If you would like to book a reading with me, or a mentorship, or one of the other services I offer, you can do so through my website or through my Etsy shop. Remember to beware of scammers out there. I will never message you asking you to get a reading or book a service with me, nor will I ask in the comments on YouTube for you to book a reading with me. So if somebody's like, hey, come book a reading, it's not me. It's one of the scammers that are just ubiquitous on all social media platforms at this point. Know that you have to approach me for me to talk to you about getting a reading. I do not approach you. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below, because I do love to hear from you all. And until I see you again, blessings to you wherever your journey finds you.